Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think we are now being recorded, I hope. We are now being recorded. So good afternoon. On the 14th of December, call our meeting to order. Finance Committee. We've got a couple of things. Well, we basically have one thing that we're going to do today, which is hold our public hearing on the citizens' articles. But before we get into that, is there any comment unrelated to the citizens' articles? Hearing none or seeing none, I expect we'll have some people come in as we go through this. I think what I'd like to do is have we'll go through the articles and in our public hearing. And John, would it be appropriate as we talk on each article first to get your view on it, or should we use another form of order?
Well, this is a public hearing, Mr. Chairman, and if there are people that have come here to address the Finance Committee on their article, I think it's appropriate to hear from them first.
Okay. All right, we'll do that, and then
Certainly, I can provide comments on all the articles, and we'll have my written comments about
Right.
to elaborate or answer any questions. But I would let the proponent,
Okay.
the petitioner, make their presentation.
very good. All right, so I guess we need to call our public hearing to order, which we will do. And why don't we just start with right at the top with the articles. As I think all of you probably noted, there are a lot of sewer articles and there are zoning articles, which we typically, somebody else has the responsibility, at least on the zoning articles, to hold the public hearing, which is the planning board. And sewer articles tend to go first into the selectmen and as sewer commissioners, and then for their opinion and viewpoint. And there are some land acquisition requests for small parcels, which we have historically sent to the real estate committee to first look at, and then they provide back their opinions, and then we act on them. But certainly, if there's anybody here who wants to speak on those, they're certainly entitled to do that. So, starting from any questions? So, starting from the top, there's and I'll just start with the lead petitioner and a quick description of the article. Sheila Coffin-Harshman, which is an amendment to the sewer bylaw for parcels on Bernal Street, Lennox Way, Wisconsin Avenue, and others in the Wisconsin Water District. Anybody here from the public to speak on that? Okay, moving on. Petitioner Darcy Creech, a ban the use of all herbicides and pesticides containing glyphosate. Close. Wasn't a chemistry major. Anybody here to speak on that?
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Yep.
So as I said in my comment, in order for this to be an effective, anything other than a non-binding advisory opinion or vote, it would have to be in the form of a general bylaw to be actually enforceable. And in my experience under the case of Wendell versus the Attorney General, the town of Wendell had enacted a bylaw to ban various insecticides, herbicides, and rodenticides. And the Attorney General disapproved that bylaw because of the state law that comprehensively regulates that field, and so there was a preemption. So even if this were put into the form of a enforceable general bylaw, it's not likely it would be approved by the Attorney.
Is there anything on the horizon that would give local communities the ability to regulate pesticides?
Not that I'm aware of. There's some leeway with fertilizer, but that's very complicated.
Okay.
And that would require some input from the Planning and Economic Development Commission. But I don't believe this is a fertilizer.
No, it isn't.
It's a
Side, yep. Thank you. Pardon me? Roundup, yep.
Isn't there already a group?
Just because I know we're on, being taped, and I know it's really hard for people to hear.
For us, okay.
So,
Isn't there already a group that has addressed this? The club golf professionals? I think there is a group that has addressed this, and
Okay.
you can belong to it.
Yep, okay. Petitioner Melissa Murphy, it's a home rule petition to amend the town charter to change the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Melissa or anybody which isn't here, anybody wish to speak to this? John, would you just
Yes,
weigh in,
so,
please?
You know, the selectmen have made our services available to petitioners, and I do come in October to help people write articles. And when I was contacted by counsel for this petitioner, I had suggested a relatively simple and straightforward amendment to the town charter, the section on, specific section on Board of Selectmen. And what it would do is it would simply add a sentence that, for purposes of this charter, the Board of Selectmen shall be referred to as the Select Board. And then another sentence that says they have all the powers of selectmen under the general laws of the town code. So that was a relatively clean, simple way to do this. The petitioner decided instead that they weren't just satisfied with a change in the reference, they wanted to actually formally change the name. So if we want to go forward with this version of the petition, we could certainly send it up to the legislature. Town meeting could vote on it just the way it appears on the petition, but in reality, the legislature will want to draft a bill that will change specifically in every section wherever the word Board of Selectmen appears. And so that's going to be a very cumbersome. And there's nothing in this petition that deals with the town code meaning bylaws. So, which always could be addressed at a later date. But I just see this as being, from a legislative standpoint, I think it's going to be a fairly awkward thing to do,
Yeah.
as opposed to the amendment that I had proposed. So that's up to the finance committee what you want to recommend, if you want to recommend it at all.
I have a question. What have other towns done in this situation?
They've used the language that we provided.
Okay, so nobody else has gone forward with the change in the bill format?
I'm not aware of any town that has gone forward with an actual change to select board, unless it's a new charter that's being drafted, and that might be a different situation. But I'm not aware of any situation where you would have to go section by section. We have drafted the kind of language that I had suggested for other communities, and they have not voted.
Okay, just curious.
And just as a follow-up on that, John, do we know how many communities in
Joe,
Massachusetts?
would you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
grab the mic?
Do we know how many communities in the Commonwealth have gone to a gender-neutral term for the Board of Selectmen as opposed to,
You know, Joe,
is it prevalent or is it, I
it's, I think a lot of towns have done it informally without actually so Board of Selectmen just decides, hey, from now on, we want to be known as the Select Board. That's not really advisable because of some the legal implications. There have been a handful that have gone forward with a charter amendment. I can't give you an exact number. In our office, we've seen a few of these, and that's when I proposed I use language we use in a couple of other communities.
so your sense is it's a modest number these
Yeah,
days in the
It's much more
Commonwealth?
common out in the western part of the state for some reason.
Lennox changed.
Pardon me?
Lennox changed
Yeah,
to
Yeah.
select board.
recently, or,
No, a while ago, but they didn't do the amendment. They just did what he suggested.
yeah,
They just informally
Yeah.
or administratively.
Wait, did
changed it.
okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Thank you, John. Ryan Fitch, petitioner, zoning map change, rezone on Nantucket Avenue. This will go to the planning board. Is anybody here who wants to speak on this? Okay. Arthur Reed, the next article, which is sewer bylaw amendment for 54 Bernal Street. Arthur isn't here, I know. Anybody else want to speak on that?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yeah.
can only point out that 54 Bernal Street is one of the parcels listed in Article 8 that for inclusion in the sewer district. So this appears to me to be good.
Okay. In Article, in the A, although we don't have an address number for,
What we do, in Article 8, it's 54.
oh, okay, yeah, all right.
It's conceivable
Oh.
Article A could get voted down, though, and this article could pass, right? It's conceivable Article A could get voted down, and this article could pass. Right,
If
'cause-
you're inclined to recommend E, you could simply move to pass over Article A.
But A includes other properties, is my point. So
Yeah.
there may be some pushback on the totality of A, and for some reason, someone.
That's right, that's right. So if I were the petitioner, I would still want to go forward,
Right, that's my
Yeah.
point, yeah.
just in case.
F, Steve Cohen, a zoning map change. We'll go to the planning board. Steve or anybody wants to speak on this? G, Steve Cohen once again, acquisition of a portion of Sandwich Road, number 13 Monomoy Road. Comments? H, looks like the conveyance article for 13 Monomoy Road. Any comments? I and Mendelson, which is opposition to offshore seismic testing and offshore oil and gas development. It's a non-binding advisory vote. Any comments on that? Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Annie Mendelson.
Hi, Annie. You know, because we're,
If I could share the microphone.
yes, because we're being broadcast.
I
so-
just wanted to,
Great, thank you.
I wanted to bring this forward because there are over 120 other communities that have passed this sort of resolution as of August. And it's in response to the changes to the protections to marine wildlife.
Okay, I'm assuming this is beyond whatever the 3-mile or 12-mile limits, or,
All federal waters,
All
by
federal waters.
executive order, all federal waters are open for development and have been asked to be streamlined, streamline the application processes. 5 companies have already applied to do seismic testing. Whatever happens south of us comes up our way. If there are any problems, we will see them. So I think that we should join these other communities.
okay? Great, questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So what would be the physical limit then? It would be against all federal waters?
Yes, because they're all connected. It's one system. The tides go, the currents go, the fish migrate, the sea mammals migrate. So, yeah.
So a community doesn't have jurisdiction over all federal
No,
waters?
it doesn't, but all of these communities have passed this sort of resolution, and I thought we should join them. It's just a formal statement of opposition to the drilling.
Okay. I was thinking about enforcement.
Yeah, well, it's
Right to enforcement, so there you go.
beyond our purview.
We're putting you on the boat to go enforce.
Right, I saw that looking at it.
Ann, thank you very much, appreciate it. Ken Bogrand, approve recommendations of the Community Preservation Committee for budget transfers. Anybody here to speak on that? Just as a reminder, as it relates to community preservation, we have them that whole discussion scheduled for a different meeting, so we don't have to go through that today.
The only comment I would make, Mr. Chairman, is I'm not sure if I was reading this incorrectly or not, but I believe the reference to sales of funds should be changed to fiscal 2019 rather than 18. Just something to keep in mind when the motion is made.
Okay. Does Ken understand that?
I have not talked to Ken.
Okay. All right. Kay, again, approve the recommendation, so again, we're going to deal with that, I think, next week. Yeah. Teresa Williams amend the charter by creating a new board called the Nantucket Special Counsel to provide a judgment for anyone seeking relief from ongoing disputes that have met an impasse with the town of Nantucket. Anybody here to speak on that? Any comments on this article?
So, Mr. Chairman, you probably read my
Right.
comments. I think this is very difficult to assess or provide any clear opinion on because it's not clear what, to me, it's not clear
What the intent is.
And I think it's extremely vague.
Do any other communities in the Commonwealth have something that vaguely looks like this as an adjudicatory, part of an adjudicatory?
Nantucket does.
Like, yeah.
The special, the historic.
The district commission,
So
go ahead.
that's an example. There are, the town of Provincetown has a charter enforcement commission that is authorized to hear complaints about violation of the town charter, and they can actually take enforcement action independent of any
Mhm.
body to enforce the charter. Those are the only examples that I can think of.
Okay.
So we would have to be very careful about not violating or doing anything that's inconsistent with state law. When you start dealing with the planning board or the ZBA, I think that would be very problematic. I don't know exactly what the intent is here, so I hesitate to spend too much time talking.
I don't want to either. I just was sort of curious, is there a story behind this article? I mean, it looks like someone's got a problem that they don't know how to get unwound, and
I think so, and I think it may be a problem that they didn't want to go to court about, which I would assume would have been the other avenue for adjudication.
okay.
So, no comments from the audience. All right. Moving on, M. Cormac Collier, it's a zoning bylaw amendment for conservation restrictions. That will go to the planning board, but does anybody wish to speak to that? N is Alan Myers, waiver of a one-time sewer privilege fee for year-round residents who are required to connect in the Nantucket Armor Shivo. Anybody wish to speak on that? John, you've indicated that it's not approved as to form. Is there, beyond that, is there anything that's inherently,
Well,
an inherent problem with
I
that?
think the biggest problem I have is that it would only apply to year-round
Residents.
So I see there as being potentially discriminatory. Now, could it be done through a special act of the legislature? Well, maybe it could. And certainly you could make arguments that it doesn't. We've seen arguments that these kinds of things that only benefit local residents violate the interstate commerce clause or the privileges and immunities clause. I think through a special act, you probably could get something like this done, but that's not what's being proposed here. The other problem with this is, when the sewer privilege fee was first voted, it was actually predates my time. That was an authorization by town meeting. But under the Nantucket Sewer Act, it's the sewer commissioners, the board of selectmen, that basically, they need town meeting authorization, but they have a lot of discretion in terms of assessing privilege fees, which is just another form of government. So the only way that I can see this working would be to do a special I typically, when I look at these kinds of articles, you might say, well, then let's just turn this into a home rule petition. But, that's not really fair to the voters who read this and say, well, this is really nothing. And then to all of a sudden try to conform it into some kind of a binding vote, I think raises complete issues.
Okay. Comments? Elaine Dias authorized the Board of Selectmen to amend or release a sewer easement held by the town. You commented, anybody want to speak on that? You commented that we don't know where it is. Yep. Anybody have any inside knowledge on this? Okay. Elizabeth Sutton Sims, amend the town code to reduce the membership in the Agricultural Commission from 7 to 5. Speak on that. Any comments? Matthew Renamo, discontinue the Tacoma Green Project. Anybody wish to speak on that? John, I know you wrote it fairly extensively about this, and obviously the press has followed this a little bit. That would tend to indicate that there's some substantive problem with the article that we're in a contract and.
Well, right. That's one problem. Once legal rights vest as a result of a town meeting vote, there's case law to suggest that town meeting doesn't have the authority to rescind a prior authorization once legal rights are vested. But even if you could, there could be significant liability to if a binding contract has been entered into. The other problem with this article that I see is it really is an attempt to bind a future town meeting, which just can't be done. And it also is worded very broadly in terms of what I would say the law of unintended consequences could be in terms of affordable housing projects that is pursuing. I mean, this is obviously geared towards Tacoma Green, but when you read it, it would apply basically to the use of any town land for affordable housing, whether that be Housing Nantucket or Housing Assistance Corporation or whomever. There could be a real problem. But the bottom line is, it's not in. I can't approve it says the law. If it passed at town meeting, would it be binding on anybody? I don't think so.
So your comments about the broadness actually go to the next
Right.
You're
article
right. I'm
here.
sorry about that.
So just sticking with Tacoma, I mean, I guess the town could, if this were to pass, the town could buy out the developer and provide some economic value, but otherwise it's,
Well, I suppose that's a possibility.
yeah.
I suppose
Okay.
that's a possibility. Also, to the extent it's, now we know the planning board has issued a special permit. So to the extent that this article intends to somehow direct other town boards not to issue a permit, that's clearly beyond the authority of town meeting. It's interfering with the scope of discretion that the HDC, whomever, would have. And sometimes, you see these kinds of attempts at town meeting to stop a project, and you have to be very, very careful because, again, there are legal rights, there are constitutional rights, there are due process rights, and you don't want to go down that road
Okay.
because of liability.
Yep.
But this is an attempt to move the debate about that particular project onto the town meeting floor so that people can weigh
Yeah.
in, even though it's already been debated at multiple other places. Yes.
Moving on, R, again by Matthew Renamo, this is the moratorium, the 7-year moratorium. And obviously Matt's not here. Does anybody wish to speak to that? Tucker, do you have something you want to contribute on this, or?
I think that John has stated the position well.
Okay. Anything, observations, questions? Okay.
So the only thing I could just
Yeah.
add something, Mr. Chairman, you know, when the word moratorium is used, you know, at the November town meeting, there was a moratorium on marijuana dispensaries, but that was a zoning bylaw. It was very limited in time and scope, and the courts have reviewed zoning moratoria, and they have approved them under certain circumstances, including the kind that you passed. This is not proposing a zoning amendment. It's really a proposal for the town to impose on itself
Correct.
a limitation on the use of town.
So, I mean, it'll move to town meeting 4, and there'll be a discussion about it.
I mean, the only thing I might add, John, is, I mean, I just don't know, from the state's perspective, in terms of mandating towns to get to certain levels, if that has any bearing on this particular article as well.
Well, every time you have a affordable housing project, and Nantucket knows this very well, you want to get those units on what's called the shires, which is the state inventory of affordable housing. And it's very important that all of your affordable, that you get that number up to over 10%. Because if you do, you are somewhat protected from a 40B. So without making progress in that area, the town is going to continue to be exposed to 40B projects. And this would have no effect on the ability, obviously, of the developers to propose that.
Anything else? We're going to, because I've given Mr. Dickler a half an hour of our time as part of this, we're going to take S up at the end. So if others don't want to hang around and listen, they can depart. So T and U, these are Otani. These are, again, acquire a portion of Norbert Avenue and then to convey a portion of Norbert Avenue. Any comments? V, Scott Bamber, authorize the Board of Selectmen to lease or otherwise dispose certain parcels shown on the land court. No, you're here. Would you like, come on up if you'd like to make some comments, that'd be great.
My name is Jeff Smith, and I'm a small business owner here in Nantucket. I've been renting spot from Walter Glowacki for about 20 years, and as we all know, that's coming to an end. We have a huge industrial corridor right there that's going to just evaporate. I was lucky enough to buy a few lots over at the Coffin Pit. Unfortunately, there are quite a few of us still over in the Glowacki area. I still have a couple businesses over there. 2 years from now, we're not going to have anywhere to go. Glad Noah's here, and I hope that are you going to speak on this as well? Okay. What all of us are pretty excited about is having a place to operate. The Board of Selectmen had the power 8 or 10 years ago. I looked at a plan from Andrew Boris that had a really great place on Industry Road, cut up into small parcels for exactly this purpose. I think the tank farm pretty much trumped that, and now what I'm here for is hopefully to make a plan, this is part of that plan, to have some land 10, 20 years from now that can be used for all of us. There's a long list of 30 or 40 people that need the land. You know, the airport has some, and that's going to be swallowed up here in the next 2 years, in my opinion. What I'd like to talk about is what's going to happen 10 years from now. Let's have a little bit of forward thinking and say, let's give the Board of Selectmen some power in having some more land that can be used for all of our businesses. Like I said, there's 30 or 40 people that would love this land that we know of right now, but what we're not talking about are the businesses that could be, but they can't be because they don't have land. So I'm really excited about it. I know you guys had a negative suggestion on it at at the town meeting, which I was really disappointed about, but I do understand because of the airport. This is talking about, not now, it's talking about 5 years, 10 years from now. It's really important. Thank you.
So, just a couple, I have some questions.
go ahead.
No, go
Okay,
ahead, Joe.
Joe,
Joe, go ahead.
I'm just sort of curious, we talked about this prior to the special town meeting. Is this a zoning issue? In other words, it just isn't land zoned for people to store equipment and machinery?
Good
Or is it an economic issue that the deal you have on the Galactic property is terrific and all the other alternatives you're looking at aren't so terrific?
Fantastic question. There are very limited amounts of land available for lease or rent. It's an economic issue. 1 acre of land is roughly a market value of over $2 million. I don't know very many small businesses that can do that. The airport rates with the last RFP were, a mortgage of that $2 million. They have had the foresight to bring that down. The RFP that we're looking at right now is about $2.10 a square foot. That still doesn't pencil for my business. A lot of other businesses it won't pencil for, but I'm hoping that if we can get it down to $1.25 to $1.50 per square foot per year, that will be great. I was awarded a parcel of land at the airport 4 years ago, and an endangered grass species was found, unfortunately. So that was at 88 cents. That I can survive at 88 cents, going up with CPI. The airport was nice enough to give me another piece, and then unfortunately found a bomb, and you guys know the rest of that story. So it's taken a couple years to get past that, and now we're past that. There's a new RFP out. We'll see where that money shakes out. I don't think very many people are going to be bidding on it because it's still a little bit too expensive, but it's just part of the problem. They have now smaller lots, which is great. Maybe, I'm not for sure, no can speak on this, maybe 12 or 15 lots. Awesome. But we need more. Like, people are desperate to find a place to operate. You guys might not see that, but it's also we're operating in inappropriate areas in town. We have the opportunity to make an industrial park. Every other town has one. We have the land. Let's do it.
So, Noah, are the, on the smaller lots, or maybe the answer to this, is it still $2.10, or have?
I think so.
And how about, presumably maybe your business does need all of that land, but have you and your colleagues looked at putting together, an arrangement, a private arrangement, so you could go with an increased economic capacity?
It's still, the per square foot price is still the exact same. If you did 5 acres, we actually put in for a 5 acre parcel. A group of us did on the last RFP. It would have worked great, but we underbid the minimum and were rejected for that. There's just a point where I want to be a tenant for 10 years or 20 years. I can pull it off for a year, but my business is eventually going to fail. So there's a break point where it just isn't economic.
Well, just coming back to it, if you have to lease, let's say, an acre of land, but you only need a quarter of an acre.
Sure.
Even if the price is $2.10, your cost to your business on a quarter acre is dollars out of your pocket is just not as great.
That's why breaking it up into smaller parcels is going to be a great benefit for a lot of people if they can't afford that 210. I personally can't.
Noah, comments? Sure. Thanks very much, Tim.
Hi, Noah Garberg, Assistant Airport Manager. Here on behalf of Tom, just to provide an update on our RFP process. Since this issue was discussed at ATM, the Airport Bunker Road RFP is closed without an award being made. The RFP has subsequently been reissued with the rental rate reduced to $2.10 per square foot, which was the minimum appraisal value. The airport has also reduced the lot size. Of the 11 lots offered in the RFP, 2 are being offered at 1/8 of an acre, which is $11,434 per year. 7 are being offered at a quarter acre, which is almost $23,000 a year. And 2 lots are being offered at 1 acre, which is $91,000 and change. And this RFP closes January 5th.
Comments?
I have one question. Is the airport offering now for this airport, right?
Airport.
Did you know right
No.
now that all the costs?
Mr. Bamber, would you come and use the microphone? You're on camera up there, so
And
if you could just come on over if you want to speak.
if I may, while Mr. Bamber's walking up, it's a procurement that's in process, so I might be limited about what I can say at this time.
I just wanted to point out one thing. Yesterday, I did talk to Marcus Silverstein, the zoning officer. All the property, whether you knew this or not, out there at the Coffin Pit, it is all under the water aquifer. So nobody is even supposed to be doing hardly anything in that aquifer, the commercial bit. So he told me that yesterday. So the only property that is left is that the airport owns or the town owns out near Bunker Road out there. So that's it.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying. So hopefully you can get it together so people can rent
Right.
whatever, you know, and stay in business. Otherwise, they're going to be out of luck.
Okay. Great,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question both to Noah and back to John. Can you do a reverse auction on this property under procurement laws? You would put it out and people would bid on it, and you would start awarding land to the highest bidder, and it would just go down until you had filled up all of the land that you wanted to lease. So if somebody really wanted a piece of property and were willing to pay the $2.10 or really wanted and was willing to pay $5 or whatever, and then I mean, that's a price discovery kind of process to figure out what really is the value of the property to people like Jeff and others.
Well, the good news is that when you're doing an RFP under 30B for a real estate transaction, which this is, you do have a lot more flexibility in terms of designing the process. Unlike if you're procuring goods or services, I would say absolutely you couldn't do that. There's some wiggle room, although I'm not sure how the inspectors will approve. I don't know if they've ever approved the reverse auction specifically. I'm not aware.
Yeah.
But that's not to say they wouldn't. There is more
Yeah.
flexibility.
Just sort of a similar question. Is the airport required to set the asking rate in this RFP process at the, whatever it is, sort of the present value of however that was determined? I mean, if there aren't people to pay $2.10, you keep issuing RFPs until you find a price people are willing to pay, or are you forced to hold it at a certain level?
I don't want to say forced, but it's a pretty prescriptive process. If you establish an appraisal value as your fair market value, to offer any resource below that fair market value requires a specific FAA land release. So we'd basically need permission from the FAA to do that. Through all of the sort of FAA guiding documentation, it's not an impossible process and it's not a rare process, but it's a difficult one.
Even though the town owns the land, the FAA has to say in the rate that we can rent the land at?
For that piece of land in particular, it is covered by federal grant assurance obligations that set that standard. I can circle back with your counsel and verify that, but that's my understanding.
Thank you.
It is owned by the town, but it's under the jurisdiction of the airport commission. So any disposition of land by the airport commission does have to meet FAA requirements.
Jeff?
I just wanted to add one more thing. The reason that wild number was at $3.10, I think, is an appraisal came in at $3.10. I don't know exactly who the appraiser was. 2 years previous to that, the appraisal was 88 cents. So the RFP that I won and that
5 other people won, which is great. 3 of those people are actually there now, was 88 cents. So there's this huge disparity in 2 years that I can't figure out, and I don't think anybody else can. So I don't know how to work on that, but we can work this together so everybody can win.
Yeah.
I think what I found out on the town meeting floor was it was kind of like you didn't want to support it because it's kind of hurting the airport. So that's what I
I'm
assumed.
not sure that was our logic at
Yeah,
the,
okay.
it may have been more that it came at us very quickly, and it
Yep.
was something that just wasn't really understood,
Got
and
it.
so there wasn't,
Yep.
there just wasn't enough, at least for
Sounds
this
good.
group, enough discussion about it.
So
Where are you with the airport commission? Have you and your colleagues come to the airport commission to talk with them about this issue?
I did. Unfortunately, I did it when the RFP was out, so it negated me. But I couldn't not speak, unfortunately. So yeah,
Okay.
I unfortunately can't bid on this one either. It's due January 5th, so I'm going to wait until they. And I'm sure it takes a lot of their effort and time to be able to put out the RFP, but I'm going to have to wait for the
Yeah.
third one because, well, we'll see what happens on the 5th. So
Great.
thank you.
Is there a way to revisit that assessment? I think that's really a question for you. Is there, if the appraisal, right, is there, I mean, because if it was that different in a 2-year period, is there a way to,
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'd want to correct what Jeff said. The 88 cents rate was in, I believe it was 2011 or 2012.
well, that's why.
Obviously, there's been a CPI adjustment, and the most recent appraisal has gone into the market factors behind the elevation fee rate.
Yeah, okay, great. Not to put our chair of our select board on the spot, I'm assuming this is on your radar, if not as a board, certainly as individuals. And are you all contemplating thinking about it?
We haven't had a real discussion on it recently. I know there were some feelings about kind of finishing the tank farm and thinking about potential other big picture things that might have been needed for in the future. And seeing what happened with the airport was doing. That is similar property.
Right.
Hasn't been taken yet.
Okay.
But I'm sure that we will be discussing it.
Thank you, Don.
I have one more question for you. So right now, is the process for the airport then, if there's, since the first time you didn't award anything through the RFP, now this one closes on the 5th. If you don't get anything, it'll go out again and you'll lower the rate? Is that the process?
I can't speak to that.
You can't say, okay. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Is there,
Yeah,
no, it's
no.
fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Any?
I'd love to see some more. I'll say that.
Well, if it's going to add to the quality of our decision making, then
This is all I think about, so I'm sorry. After the award of the parcel at Bunker Road from the airport, we were doing a plan for a self-storage facility, and to bring in water was $163,000 to the site. What I think this, maybe Bamber hasn't really thought about this, but my vision would be that everybody has a spot where electric and water is already there. It's it's a little bit easier for someone just to step in and operate. It's more thought out. What airport's leasing, half of it is a forest that you have to cut down and bring in all the services. And I just think that maybe this is 10 years from now that you guys do it, but let's do it. Let's create an industrial park in an appropriate area. Thank you.
okay, great, thank you. Interesting idea. If we're done with that, let's move on to Richard Kelman. It's a zoning map change, a rezone, 43 Appleton Road. Anybody who wants to speak to that? It will go to the planning board, as you know. X, John Brescher, amend the sewer district map for Hawthorne Lane parcels. Anybody wish to speak on that? Y, Mr. Brescher, again, a zoning map change for 56 South Shore Road. Going to the, yes.
If I may, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So, one of the things with the various sewer parcels going to the sewer district, they're actually directed in two different ways. And if the board wants to make a positive motion, as I've said in my, as I said in my notes, this is really technically an amendment to the town bylaw. And so, the way that it's phrased in, for example, which one, towards the beginning, A is the right way.
Way
So
to do.
if you do these, we're gonna have to revise the motion so it accurately reflects exactly what's being done, amending the bylaw.
Okay. Any comments on X or Y? And finally, Z, which is also another sewer map change. Any comments on that? Okay. Anybody wish to speak on any of these articles that might not have gotten a chance or thought of something they'd like to say?
One quick comment, and I've made this at the selectmen's level as well, is I'd like to make sure that just because somebody's going to the planning board doesn't mean that there are numbers attached and impacts attached, and I hope that you continue your same level of review of everything, because there's a lot of these things have some very substantial impacts that need to be dealt with, and we sometimes don't have the time to do that, so.
Thank you and noted. Appreciate it. Okay. The final article, Mr. Dickler. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Dickler has a citizens article to authorize the Board of Selectmen to place a $30 million tax levy override on a ballot to generate funds to meet the town's needs, not being met with the town budget. So, I suspect you have heard from town council as to form and whatnot, but what we're very interested in doing is hearing about this, engaging in a discussion. We would invite anybody in the public to also participate if you have any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to you. So,
Thank you. Let me know if you can't hear me.
if you would pull that ahead, it's probably, we're probably okay for hearing you. I think it's the folks that might be watching.
Okay.
Heaven forbid. This is what people are doing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but
Let me begin by introducing myself to everybody, since most of you don't know me. My name is Howard Dickler. I'm a physician. I spent my life in medical research. I came to Nantucket first in 1966. I came for a week in June, and it stayed 50 degrees, and it rained, and it was foggy, and the wind blew, and I should have hated it, but I loved it. And so I've been coming my entire adult life whenever I could. 20 years ago, we bought a house in Tom Nevers that the real estate agent said needed love, and we've been giving it love ever since. When my wife and I retired from our careers in medical research, we moved here. This will be our third winter. And so I love the island, and that's the reason why I'm here. So I'm sure I would be preaching to the choir, or two choirs that are here. if I said that the island doesn't have enough money to do everything that it wants to do. And that bothered me. It bothered me, for example, when the Nantucket sewer was turned down at the ballot, and it meant that we were not going to be active at cleaning up that harbor. When I came in '66, you could see to the bottom of every harbor. The water was pristine. If I had a personal agenda, that would be what I would like to see done. But there's lots of things that need doing, and you could make a list as well as I could do. I put this in the presentation. I think it was mailed to you, emailed to you.
And
by
it's been
David.
distributed to everybody, so.
So I don't want to go over that point by point. But I've been attending a lot of committees and a lot of commissions, and the theme is always the same. There's a lot of things they want to do, and there isn't money to do them. The town administration feels the same way. That was clear in the budget presentation last night at the Board of Selectmen. And there's things the Board of Selectmen that would like to do that they don't have the money to do. So, in my career, I was a problem solver, and I decided, well, I would take a crack at this problem. And so what you have, the proposal involves a very simple idea. I'm a simplistic guy. That is, you could do a tax override, tax levy override, and you could prevent it from impacting the residents, and with the shift rate change, you could prevent it from affecting the commercial, industrial, and personal property rates as well. It seemed to me that one of the reasons that overrides have a problem is that people don't want to pay taxes. That doesn't make Nantucketers different than anybody else, but it certainly is a problem. So I think you need a bigger income stream, period. And this was a way to do it, and it would be a way to not impact the islanders, and so that's what the proposal was all about. Putting it on the, as a citizen article was only meant to get a discussion going. I certainly didn't mean to take away a prerogative from the Board of Selectmen. It wasn't meant to be directive. It was more a suggestion. So clearly that was not the way to go. So we can talk about the concerns. One of the large concerns is how do you prevent the money from being wasted? And my simple idea for now was that if you used projects that were already approved by the town so that you knew the voters favored them, and you could use the first year's money to fund those projects. Even if they were debt exclusion originally, you could use the money and you could pay cash up front. So all the money would be utilized, and that would give you time to put in place a strategic plan using the whole community to derive that plan so that everybody had a stake in saying how the money got used. So it would be different from how they express themselves now, which is at the ballot box for every single override, but they would get a chance to express themselves. And the discussion would not be, we can't afford it, but rather, what should we do first? What has the highest priority? How can we make the island better? I listed out the cons for you. The first con was how do we prevent the waste of the money? That was the idea with the using approved projects in the first year and strategic planning after that. The second con is that the non-resident property owners would get a large increase. That would be 51%. Everything is a matter of perspective. They're now paying the third lowest rate in the state of Massachusetts. To put that in perspective, if they live in Boston, they pay 4 times as much on their house per assessed value as they do in Nantucket. And even after that raise, they'd be the 6th lowest in the state of Massachusetts. So that's still a pretty good deal. In addition to that, they want that money to be used to improve the island and improve their experience when they're here. Nobody wants to get stuck trying to find a parking space downtown. Nobody wants to get stuck in traffic jams going around the rotaries. They want the same improvements that everybody wants. They want bike paths and walking places that they can safely traverse if they want to get out and get some exercise. So that was how I viewed that concern. There is a concern that rental property will get hit as well, because that's not exempt. You could possibly mitigate that by offering owners who rent year-round a break on that, and that would be an incentive to provide rental housing. And so that was my overview. I probably went about it in the wrong way. I had a talk with Brian this morning. He told me there are greater problems in that certain things these funds would not be eligible for, like sewers, because that's an enterprise fund. And he told me that there weren't shovel-ready projects for the first couple of years for the money, so that's a problem. So we discussed trying to come up with a smaller plan with things that were ready, things that would benefit the island immediately. And then my plan is to try and engage with the selectmen, get on their agenda, and see if I can convince them that this is really worth doing. Any suggestions to make this better or to get it going would be much appreciated. My only goal is to get money for the island of Nantucket.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments, discussion?
What percentage of our revenue comes from non-resident taxes?
Off the top of my head, probably somewhere between 85 to 88%.
So, did anybody weigh in? And then I'm happy to start the, so, sort of first question that jumped out at me, and I do agree that our second homeowners are, definitely want their experience here to be, as hassle-free as they can, which means traffic mitigation and things like that. The thing that jumped out at me is the fact that we're basically saying to our second homeowners, this is all on you. And by taking all the burden off of us year-round residents, we have no skin in the game any longer. So in my non-scientific way of asking my friends who have summer homes here or second homes, I've gotten hell no and hell no. Notwithstanding the fact that everybody fully recognizes that their taxes here are pretty low. So, I mean, how do you sort of, in your mind, how do you square the circle that us residents wouldn't be required to make a contribution on this $30 million or whatever the nominal amount is, or?
The making it free for the residents was only employed to get them to vote for it, okay? I think that the taxes on the residents are too low as well. If it were up to me, I'd propose a tax increase for everybody. So, as I said, it's the third lowest in the state. I had a house where I lived before that had a reasonably similar assessment, and my taxes are a fourth. And then they got even lower than that because I got the residential exemption. So I think that they should. I mean, I think somehow they have to learn to connect the things that they need with the amount that they have to pay. So if you wanted to do it so that the residents did pay some, maybe not as much as the non-residents, the only goal I have is to pass it.
Yeah. So you obviously feel that by going through and putting these specific projects on the, before town meeting for a debt exclusion, that's not enough of an endorsement or lack thereof of how the voters feel about the projects and the spending of the money.
No, that is a very strong way, but they often don't approve them, even then when they're for very good reasons.
Right, so we don't approve the projects. We currently have the capacity, as I know you know from talking to Brian, to borrow the money, at extremely favorable rates. So if we don't have, and so we have a body of people, of 800 people that come together, every spring to vote on these things. Isn't that as an effective a way of going about this as voting, asking, in this case, the residents to, non-residents to vote to tax our non-residents to pay for all of this, and then lets our residents off the hook and having to make some decisions about how they want to spend their tax dollar. I mean, there's actually an intrinsic appeal to this approach. It's sort of the unintended consequences. For me, personally, it's a matter of fairness to the 85% of the people that aren't here that don't vote. If you would also propose putting this, figuring out a way that everybody who owned property here could vote on this, that might actually be a fairer way to decide whether we wanted to spend our money that way. I'm sure John is looking at me saying, good luck with that one.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, I'd have to say, Dr. Dickler, I take exception with your first initial assumption that we have a money problem. I don't think we have a money problem. We have a political will problem. And every project, certainly since I've been on the Finance Committee, there have been projects that have passed at town meeting and projects that haven't passed at town meeting. But the arithmetic that sort of underlies how you want to raise these funds affects every override that we've ever done. And in fact, it's always the non-resident property owners that bear the biggest chunk of the burden. So I'm not, while I find this sort of fascinating that would certainly raise the money, I don't think the problem is that we've always been able to raise the money. The question is, how do we communicate to the voters and the attendees at town meeting that this is a project worth voting for? And your idea sort of takes that out of people's hands. It just sort of gives people a pot of gold to work with. Again, in one man's opinion. So.
Well, I think the facts are pretty undeniable. I mean, we have a $22 billion assessable tax base. Okay, so, and if you figure we can raise to 2.5% of that, we could raise, almost $500 million a year? We have more than enough capacity to manage all of our projects. Ahead of, and so ahead of Cambridge and. Yeah, it's enormous. It's enormous. We could buy. Would they like to be sold? No, we could expand. So I'm with Joe on this. I mean, we've in my 5 years on the Finance Committee, we've never had an issue of. It's a political will. It's a community will on, and certainly on some of the subjects, a disagreement as to how to best go about doing the projects, or whether they're even needed. So I mean, I probably share your, on the sewer project that did not pass, whatever town meeting it was. I was incredulous too, and the economics for residents were very, very modest. Most of that money was going to be raised on the non-resident properties, and yet the voters didn't want to do it. So you could go into a lot of discussion as to why that happened. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I just make the point that I get difficulty this were to pass town meeting, and the selectmen decided it was a good idea, the selectmen could put an override on the ballot for $30 million.
Or really any number that they,
Any number.
you've just sort of done this on a $30 million.
The
Is
only
there any,
reason I-
there's no science behind that particular number?
No,
I
the
think you
only-
added up the projects that were probably outstanding. And
No, I didn't even
Oh,
do that.
okay.
I picked the largest number that I could protect the residents.
Okay.
So if that were to pass at the ballot, you would have to appropriate this year that $30 million. Raise and appropriate that at town meeting in order for that override to take effect. In your case, that wouldn't be a problem because the Department of Revenue used override dollars as the first dollars spent. And your operating budget, right, $94 million. So you could achieve a permanent increase in your levy capacity through an override without raising a single dollar more at town meeting. And then going forward, that amount will grow each year by the new growth factor and by 2.5%. Would you have to tax to that full amount? No. It's just an increase. Yeah, because one of the things Brian and I were talking on the sidebar is while you have, there are two limits in Prop 2. You can't raise taxes in excess of 2.5% of the total valuation. In addition, you cannot increase your tax levy each year by more than 2.5%. So this would achieve a permanent increase in that limit of $30 million. Now, if you wanted to use some of this money in the first year, you could propose increases in your operating budget, but if it was going to be significant, I would recommend, obviously, that you make that supplemental appropriation contingent on the passage of this, because you don't want to do that unless the vote was before town. So I hope
Is this time, we have to have a special election for ballot, right? Because we couldn't get this on the ballot.
that's right.
So this would be a kind of a very multi-step process to do this, under this form.
And typically, though, this is called an operational override. It's to fund your annual operating budget. It typically is not used to fund major capital projects, as the town has done over many of the recent large projects. You do that through the debt exclusion. And so, for example, the fire station has a debt exclusion. And so I'm not quite sure what Mr. Dickler is saying about, are you talking about using some of this money to pay off the bonds on the fire station and not use the fire station debt exclusion? Because I'm not sure you can do that. You could pay the bonds, but assuming there's no prepayment penalty.
We haven't even issued it. So in theory, I don't want to put words in Mr. Dickler's mouth, but in theory, I think under his concept, rather than actually even leveraging the debt exclusion,
You wouldn't issue bonds.
we wouldn't issue it and we just pay it with it. We pay it directly from the raising authority. And I don't know what that would do relative to the vote or something like that. I don't think it would do anything if you wouldn't issue the bond.
If you don't issue the bonds, there's no debt service.
Right,
Okay,
so that
the debt exclusion would be
Right,
irrelevant.
so then under this theory, we would pay 20 million in cash and just pay it out under that. I guess is that way?
Yeah, that's right. I was looking for 28 million for the first year to put into substantial things that benefited the island that you wanted anyway. And, I think they're probably, if the fire station is, how much, 20, 18?
20 million.
20.
Well, a little over 21, but we allocated free cash to the actual payment. The
Okay.
actual dollars.
But you have a small amount of capital projects that could be added to come to 28. So,
I'm sure we could find more than one way
Well,
to spend it. I'm sure that
my thought
that's not the
was-
issue, I don't think.
setting aside for the moment the idea that it's unfair, my idea was to give the people a say. But it's different. The human mind is a very funny thing and works in funny ways. So if you have a pot, and now it's how do you spend it, it's different than the question, should you create a pot? And that's where I was trying to get for the And you need a way, I think, to retain that money if there was an agreement. You'd have to have a fund that the town created where the money would reside until they could decide where it went.
Has there historically been an increase in taxes on non-residential property owners before? Or have we ever had an eye and said, well, you know what, residents are okay, but non-residents shouldn't have?
Well, sure, every time we do an residential exemption,
Okay.
I mean, that burden has to be made up somewhere else, and it falls on our non-resident.
Okay.
So, but I'm not aware. Matt, are you aware, have we ever done anything like this in years past where we've,
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, not raise the money, but have charge our non-resident taxpayers differentially from I'm not even sure you can do that.
Residential exemption.
Do already.
The residential exemption is the only way to do it. Yeah, yeah.
We do it in some of the fees, like if you get your permit by a certain date, it's $50,
Yeah.
$100 later, there are certain things like that. You know, I think what happens whenever we talk about this, our rates are low, our assessments are high, our median is median, our average is average when compared to the state. Our ability to pay is a lot less than some of the places we're comparing to. The average resident here makes a lot less than the guys in Concord and the places that the town, and I have this argument every year, and the guys from Concord are making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. People here are making $100,000. If they're lucky, it averages 80 something. So our ability to pay is less. So that's where we have the difficulty. So in the fairness issue, the other thing that Mr. Dickler did that was smart is a lot of businesses. This would your residential exemption only takes care of your residents. So if you're running a small business like these guys that were here earlier, myself, all of a sudden you've got 2 homes for employees and you've got your business that's taxed at a district rate. Before you know it, you're paying $30,000, $40,000 a year, which is what I paid last year. That can go up 2.5% a year. I can afford that. I can't have it double. So so he was smart to say you have to look at that. So there's a lot to this, and I think that's and it's tempting. What he's saying is pretty tempting. If it turns into wages, we're dead. But
The residential exemption gets set you guys set that each year, right? Is that,
Just raised it
yeah,
to 25.
and that's something the Board of Selectmen do every year? Is that?
Yeah. It's a math equation based on the average of houses, and then Debbie Dilworth figures out what it is that year.
Yeah.
Is there a cap on the actual dollar amount?
It's a percentage.
So it's only a percentage, so it's not 25% up to $5,000?
Is there something
On-
that goes so, like on some condominiums, doesn't it almost become negative?
Oh,
There's
it's,
like a
yeah,
minimum?
there has to be, it's a,
Minimum is
there's a
10,
minimum of
it's 10%.
of the value, in assessed value. You can't go below that.
She adjusts it by hand.
We have to, yes, and we actually, not as an argument about not raising the residential exemption, but going higher will dramatically increase the amount of hand calculations that have to be done to do this, because it will then bring in substantially more properties that will fall below the 10%, and you have to go back through and manually adjust them and import it into the system to generate the tax bills correctly. So it is, not that is a reason not to do it, but
Right.
there is a minimum of 10% of the assessed valuation.
But that exemption has now been raised to 35%.
Well, we
At the
No,
state,
the limit.
they've just,
The limit.
but we just raised ours to 25,
But you can go.
35, correct, which is what Mr. Dickler is proposing as part of this.
The residential exemption is very interesting calculation because most people think, oh, okay, I get 20 or now 25% off, but actually they get much more than that off because the residential exemption is calculated on the average assessment in the jurisdiction. And the average assessment for fiscal 18 is 1.9 million something, which is considerably above what the average resident assessment is. So they're actually saving much more. That's why it can get to negative territory.
Is it set at the same time every year? Around this time.
And the other thing you realize is that the average is, 2,190,000, but the average person with a residential exemption, the value of their home is sort of 1.2 or something. And the average home of everybody else is 2.4. So, so the way the math works, you get a home that's, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but is you take a home that's 40%, less, 40% cheaper, then you're adding, X amount more on it, which is kind of interesting. You have to do the equation.
So rather than raise a pile of money, another alternative is for the selectmen to sort of manage this in their messaging of big projects every year, right? I don't know if there's a mechanism for doing that, but you could say, we're doing the Nantucket sewers. We'd like to do the Nantucket sewers at town meeting, and oh, by the way, we'll give you 2% more on the resident exemption if we do it, and you'll come out net zero voters.
Which is sort of what we a little bit.
Yeah, you do kind of, and that's why you don't go all the way to. That's part of the reason you don't go all the way to 35, right? Is to give yourself some dry powder in that equation.
But there's a disconnect though in the taxpayers, because you look at some of the stuff you just looked at. They're getting they're getting sewer for no cost. It's on the taxpayers up. The one we just did on the plus parcels. They were going to pay $50,000 to $80,000 for IA systems, and we voted on the parcels. We're going to give them pump grinders at half price, and they're still coming to town meeting and asking for a waiver of another $6,000. So they just saved $80,000 each, $100,000, and more. So there is a disconnect in our voters where I don't think they realize what things cost. And as long as that is there, I think we're going to have a difficult time, getting some of these things passed. It's interesting.
Any other comments? Anybody else want to?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you sought or are you interested in feedback from the non-resident voting, non-resident taxpayers? They have a group that you could go see.
Sure. I have been a target many times in my life because I propose things that are a little off the wall. This isn't the first place. Surprisingly, I actually succeeded a few times.
Well, I think that you may find that there are more people who share. Thank you. I think you might find that there are non-resident taxpayers who are in favor of this. Maybe not at the levels that you're talking about, but I hear different opinions than Mr. Worth's friends have. People who think that our roads could be better, that they don't enjoy reading that our schools aren't performing well. They would prefer to see water quality better protected, and they wonder why we don't charge, why our tax rates are so low. So, if there was some data collected, even non-scientific feedback, where 40 or 50 or some greater number of non-residents are in favor of something like this, that may grease the skids for you as you try to get support from residents. Take away that argument that people think this is unfair if you find out that there's a plurality or a majority of people who don't have the opportunity to vote but would support it anyway. So,
I actually, great suggestion.
It's a great
And
idea.
I think I would decouple it from this exact proposal. I think we're due for a discussion with everybody who pays taxes here about what the infrastructure, what all of the things that we sort of struggle with every year. Last night, you guys started in on one of your goals, I think, beefing up technology. What are we going to do about technology? Not whether we've got the latest, MacBooks sitting in people's offices, but, our communication technology, which is going forward at enormous rates of speed, which could totally transform Nantucket in terms of access to the $300,000 jobs that other people have that we don't have the ability to have access to. So I think there's a pretty valid discussion to be had, and then whether it's this kind of a proposal or a different kind of proposal on how to pay for them, then you can join in on that. As a catalyst to have the discussion, I think you've done a great service to get, at least getting people to talk about it, if not getting people to act on it right now. But so I'm very much in favor of that. I mean, I would like to hear my friends say they'd be more than happy. And in fact, they do talk about wanting, the things that make their life more enjoyable, maybe a little different than some of the services that we need as year-round folks. But that's okay, and that's a fair discussion to have.
Yep.
And I think part of it is engage in a discussion so that they at least know that diligence is being done, that money's not being squandered on projects that are, less than attractive. So. Sure.
I'd be glad to work with anybody. As far as technology, one of my favorite things to suggest is, of course this takes money, is think about the school curriculum in terms of setting the students up to be competitive for either for jobs or for the training for jobs that can be done through technology remotely, because then they can work from Nantucket.
Right. Yep. It's a big one.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you want me to do about the article, if anything?
You should call it to, if you wish to, and engage in discussion on town meeting floor about it. I don't, I'm not, certainly I'm going to speak right now for our committee, but, if one of your purposes is to start a conversation, then call it on town meeting floor. I would certainly, continue to get around town and talk with people.
Yeah, my suggestion between now and town meeting would be to bring it to the town association, bring it to the Civic League,
Yes,
try to hear from as many groups as you can, including and maybe primarily non-residents. I think really that's the ticket to getting buy-in that's going to build the momentum to get this going.
It's a non-voting taxpayer group.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they need for that.
Yeah, well, this is the kind of thing that might get them to, be interested.
Yeah.
And I think, Mr. Dickler, it was your suggestion that there be some group that maybe includes some non-residents that decides how some of this money's spent. And, that could, I think, be a good thing for the town if we had more engagement from non-residents. There's a lot of expertise. There's a lot of, there's untapped potential, I think, there. Maybe we don't always need to wait for smart people to retire and move here before they start chipping in on our problems.
Well, thank you for the suggestions. I already have left the message for the Civic League and for 2 other neighborhood associations.
Good.
Great. That's what I was planning to do.
Great.
Super.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for taking your time. Thank you for putting some thought into this. Very much
for
appreciate it.
listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Our public hearing is still open. Do we have anything else that we want to cover as part of that? If not, can I get a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Okay. What? Sorry? Yes, please.
The only reason, Ron Bamber, the only reason I'm saying this is I've been here for 47 years. Some of you have been here maybe for 90 years, but I came when I was 33. What I want to say is, here's one of the big things. I had a duplex for sale on 9 Point Judith. The people that owned it are local people. You don't even, the property taxes, you don't pay any tax on the property because it's condo. Totally ridiculous. Then the people are nice people that own it. They get a $300,000 exemption against half of the house they own. Their taxes are only $400 a year. Outrageous. I brought it up to the assessors. I said, this is ridiculous. Nice people in the assessors. They know who I am. The other thing, too, that I brought up 10 years ago, a lot of these people that have passed away, they're still getting the exemption, their kids, 10 years after they died. I can go out this window and look at one property right now, if you know where I'm talking about.
You've told me about it before. I know
It's
exactly what you're
outrageous.
talking about.
Nobody does nothing about it. The other thing is, that's two things. The other thing is, the people that work for the town in Nantucket, some of them that only work 20 hours a week, do they still get the 100% insurance and benefits? My friend Bernie Bartlett, who was former building inspector, I believe they did. They work 20 hours a week, they get the same benefits as if they work 40. Is that true or not? Are you on the finance committee? Are you the head one?
I'm not on the finance committee.
What do you do?
He's the head one.
Director of
Yeah.
finance.
He's the director of finance for the town.
Town, okay. What's your name again?
Brian.
Brian, what's your last name? I don't know if I talked to you once or not, did I? So, all I'm saying is one thing. Sometimes it isn't how much you make, it's all the pitfalls and the money you're losing. But I've told a lot of people some good ideas here, a lot of the selectmen, about what they should do when people get a building permit. The first thing they have to do is put in 50 to 75 feet of cracked rock on their property and driveways. Otherwise, all the dirt from the job sites comes right down the street. It plugs up all the drains on the entire island. I've been telling people at the selectmen for 9 or 10 years. They do nothing about it. I did talk to a couple of people about the problem in Brant Point and Washington Street, where all the drains, when you get a high tide, the water just comes right up, goes down the street, gets all the fertilizer, and it goes right back into the harbor. What did I tell them to do? Very simple. Go across from the White Elephant, where there's a massive big wetlands or swamp, run all the drains into there. Stop the drains going into the harbor, and then all the salt water wouldn't come back in and flood the whole town and pollute the harbor. And you know what they said? That's a great idea. We're working on it, some of them. So why don't they get to it? That was 9 months ago.
That's not within my purview.
No, I'm just telling you the things. It's, you
Mr.
gotta
Member,
use-
I would, the selectmen meet on Wednesday evenings at 6 o'clock.
yeah.
They have a public comment period.
Or you can catch them on the
Well,
way out.
you know, sometimes, you know, you tell people about this are good ideas, but, you know, they don't even do it. They are doing some good things in the assessors, Mr. Randy and some of them. I'm not saying they're not, and they have a big job on their hands, I think, you know. So I can see that, you know, what's going on. But so much for that. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, now can I have a motion to close the public
So
hearing?
moved.
Second?
Aye.
Thank you. One final bit of information I need, or action. A couple of weeks ago, Stephen asked if he could step down from his appointment as our representative to the Human Services Committee, and I did an executive decision and called Denise and asked her to step in, which she did, and because we've had meetings. So I would just like to, for the sake of the record, ratify that the Finance Committee is in approval of that decision. So can I have a motion to that effect? Second.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for taking it a little bit out of order, but there were meetings going on that we needed to do. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All right.
I could find